Hello, John Paul. I'm just going to be bibble-babbling over the microphone so I can see if anyone has any problems hearing me. How's my microphone? All the people out there? No, you don't have your headphones? Oh, great. Okay. We'll see what they say. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to wait till 11:30 before I kick this thing off. If you haven't already done so and you can hear my voice, if you could just introduce yourself in the chat, it'll help us out with the attendance, and it'll let us know that you can actually get the chat working so that way we can answer any questions you have as we go along. So I'll start right away at 11:30 just to be cognizant of your time, and hopefully we can actually get through all this content within an hour. Sometimes we do go over, so we'll try to cover everything. Okay, so the time is now 11:30. I do see that there are some people watching here. What do we got? Eight people watching right now. Okay, so they probably just haven't figured out the chat thing yet. But that's fine. I'm going to proceed without you. As soon as you guys figure out the chat, which I believe we sent out the instructions to your email, it basically requires you to, I think, create a YouTube channel or something like that, or sign in, or you just as long as you're signed in with any TDSB account, you should be able to add the chat feature. So welcome and thank you very much for attending the AirWatch webinar. There is a bit and a lot to cover, so hopefully we can get through all this within a timely manner. Of course, if you do have to jump out at any time, that's totally understandable. So yeah, if you could just introduce yourself in the chat, that'd be great so that we can take attendance and make sure everyone who registered is indeed here. So before we begin, I just want to let you all know that the webinar is being recorded, so at any moment, if you have to leave, do not worry, because this video, using the same link that you're actually using right now, will be available at the end of the webinar with everything that I've said. Let's say I go over the hour and you have to take off. That's totally fine, because the same link, you can go back and watch it or pick up where you left off or anything like that. Also, there is about a 10-second delay between the moment that I speak and the moment that you hear it on your end. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. If I do not see what you're saying in the chat right away, do not worry about it. I have somebody who's actually looking at the chat, and he will answer questions that are pretty quick, and he can answer them right away. He'll answer them in the chat, in the chat itself. And anything that requires a little bit more detail, I may have to pull it for the Q&A session, which will be at the end, where I can kind of show in detail, because at that point, I'll have all the time in the world. So we'll do that. So just feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And again, that 10-second delay, I may not see it, or you may think that I missed your question, but I'm just, it's 10 seconds before you actually hear me address it. So there is that to be cognizant of. And before we begin, also just keep in mind there is some quality control features in the YouTube player. In the bottom right hand corner, if you hover your mouse over the video, you'll see a little gear icon appear. From there you can click that, go to quality, and adjust it to something higher if you find that it's hard to see what I'm showing on the screen. Mind you, the higher the resolution or the higher the quality, sometimes it could slow down the video. So just keep that in mind. You can adjust that, but by default it's set to auto, so it should try to find out the best quality for your connection. Also, that there is a button next to the volume control that says live. If you see that the button is not red, it means that the player has kind of fallen out of the latest sync. What you'll want to do is if you see that it's not red, you'll click the live button and then it will go red, and at that moment you can you'll be on the quote-unquote livest possible of the video. And some prerequisites to this is that AirWatch access. We're hoping that by now you all have access to AirWatch, which is granted by your principal through LAS. We did check the attendance list and make sure that everyone that's in attendance here should be added or should have access to AirWatch. We did a last-minute verification even before this video started, so hopefully everyone here will have access to actually log into the AirWatch console. But, you know, I've said that before, and sometimes there's always like one or two stragglers. For some reason, they don't get it, and I'm not sure why, but just a heads up on that. We're also hoping that also you have at least one device enrolled in AirWatch. I'm going to briefly touch on enrollment so you can see what I'm referring to when I say enrolled. And the last thing also is that there are links in the video description that kind of take you to our knowledge base and our contact information if you need any further help after this on dealing with AirWatch. So AirWatch, what is it? If you don't know by now, AirWatch is basically a mobile device management system / enterprise mobility management system. The two terms are interchangeable, and they both refer to the idea that your your iPads rather, are all communicating with this central point, which is AirWatch, and then they receive configurations and apps from that central point. So it allows us to better manage them or to control them centrally. Similar to like how all our computers, you know, we can control those. It's the same thing with the iPads. There are some benefits to having AirWatch. It can be troublesome at times, but these are the benefits that made us really implement this solution to begin with. The first one being the automatic TDSB wireless network access. So prior to AirWatch, your iPads had to join TDSB staff or TDSB student at the time. Now we have TDSB Wi-Fi, but the idea is that we didn't want people to actually log in using their credentials to the Wi-Fi, because these iPads should have consistent access to the Wi-Fi. So now all the AirWatch iPads will join WLAN TDSB01, requiring no username and password. That's the idea. There's also easy app installation for multiple iPads, so no longer do you have to go to the App Store and sign in with your Apple ID, find the app that you want, and download it on every single iPad. That's fine for 20 iPads, but when you're a school that has 100 plus iPads, that can be a real pain. With AirWatch, you can deploy all those apps centrally and wirelessly to your iPads. There's also some built-in security policies that kind of keep the students from meddling with the iPads too much, such as adding and removing apps, or what we used to have is people would be applying passcodes to the device but not telling their teacher. So you'd pick up an iPad and it would say enter in a passcode, and you wouldn't know what that passcode was. So you know, you try to guess it and then it locks your iPad out. So they can't do that anymore. There are a lot of security restrictions which I'm going to show in just a moment. And the last benefit is the school level inventory. So you can actually get a list of all your iPads, see, you know, what the hardware is, what version of iOS there's running, whether when they've last connected. So it kind of lets you visually see all your iPads in your school, even though they may not be in one room. So who can log in? By default, all principals can log in to the AirWatch web console. AirWatch administrators can log in, which your principal has added you, or we have added you if you've gotten to this webinar, so you should already be at a point where you can log in. AirWatch administrators can be added through LAS by your principal, so we're hoping at this point you've already all been added, and we kind of verified that, as I said earlier. And let's say you want a new AirWatch administrator at the school and the principal adds you today. It could take 12 to 24 hours for that new administrator to have access to the console. But again, we're hoping that all of you have access by now, because we kind of try to force that this time around. So this demo, or rather this webinar, will cover what the iPad's new look and feel, so you'll get to see what the AirWatch iPad looks like. We're going to cover navigating the AirWatch console, so how to get around using the console to manage all your iPads. We're going to show you how to organize your iPads into smart groups, and smart groups are what the product calls basically just groups. You put all your iPads into groups, and then you apply different settings or different apps to the groups. And also how to add and remove apps and web clips on your iPads using those smart groups, which will all become clear by the end of this webinar. First and foremost, I want to draw your attention to what an AirWatch iPad looks like. So the two key components of when you pick up an iPad that's in AirWatch is the agent and the catalog app. So I put a slide up there of the icons. And I'm actually going to flip over to one of the iPads that I have with me here so you can see I actually have one. And so when you first turn on an iPad, you'll see that it's got the TDSB logo. Oops, let's go to sleep really quick. Got the TDSB logo and a blue background at the lock screen. So all the iPads across the TDSB that are in AirWatch should look very similar to this. They all have the TDSB logo, same blue background, and no passcode. When you press the home button, it jumps right in. And as I said, the two apps that we're focusing on here are the agent and the catalog up here. These should be installed on every AirWatch iPad by default. The AirWatch agent is sort of like the brains that communicates with AirWatch, and the catalog is where you can go and pull apps, which I'll show you how that works in more detail later. But I just want to go over some of the things with an AirWatch iPad right out of the box. The first thing you may notice is that there is no app store, which right away kind of freaks people out, and then they wonder, how do I get apps on this iPad? So what they've done is they've made AirWatch mandatory, so you don't really have an option. If your iPad gets wiped, it will go into AirWatch, and when it goes into AirWatch, that app store will be gone. Do not fret, the iPad still has the app store, it is just hidden. So if for whatever reason you don't want to deploy an app with AirWatch and you need an app right away and you can't wait the time it takes to log into AirWatch and deploy your app, you can actually circumvent all the restrictions on this iPad. So some of the restrictions are that, like I said, the App Store is gone. Oops. So the App Store, usually would be right here. There are also some settings that you cannot adjust anymore. One of them being there used to be a device passcode and thumbprint, I believe, over here. That is gone by default. There's a bunch of things that are actually you cannot change with an iPad right out of the box. But at any moment, we can actually unlock everything for this iPad, bringing it back to a regular iPad, we'll say, that if you were to go to the store and buy it yourself. And how we do that is we log into the AirWatch agent, which is that blue shield there. It's going to pop up and say a bunch of other stuff. Let's see, allow agent to access your location. Always allow, sure. So with the location, it can help you track it if you ever lose it. So I would recommend turning that on. You can choose to turn it off, though, if you want. When the AirWatch agent app finally loads, you'll see that it'll ask you for a username and password. Any TDSB employee can put in their employee number and password into this login screen here, and it will unlock all the restrictions. So Carter, I was actually going to show you that some iPads, if they do not have the TDSB logo, like on the back screen, so you see that there's no TDSB logo, it's possible that that iPad is not enrolled in an AirWatch. And I actually have one here that I was gonna kind of bring up. Oh no, that's one's wiped. Hang on, I got one here that I'll show you. So this one is on the initial setup, and if I were to go through the setup, what's going to happen is this iPad will not automatically go into AirWatch because it is what's known as a non-TDSB iPad is what we call it. So just to briefly touch on that, because I think it is important, is when you're going through the initial setup of an iPad, at some point during the setup, it will ask you for a username and password after you join the Wi-Fi. So it would actually normally show it at this point, and it did not. So if I go to continue through the setup, at no point is it actually asking me for that username and password. So just to see it in contrast with this one, So here's one we'll consider the one on the left to be a TDSB purchased iPad, which is in Spanish right now. Let me back out here. Oops. Yeah. Okay. So this one is purchased by the TDSB in that somebody went into SAP and bought this iPad. If, for example, your school had gotten an iPad through a grant, or maybe it perhaps was donated to the school, or anything of that sort, then it would actually not go into AirWatch. So if I'm doing this initial setup here, once I get to a certain point, I'm just gonna try to zip through this. Okay, so this remote management part of the initial setup is where it actually goes and starts talking to AirWatch. So it asked me for the username and password. In here is where I would put in my school's 4-digit Trillium number, and then it would put it into AirWatch. This iPad is one that's not in DEP, and at no point during the setup does it ask me to do that. So after I join the Wi-Fi, at this point it's supposed to say remote management, but it doesn't, because this would be quote unquote considered a donated iPad. If your iPad you're saying is not donated, you're 100% sure that it was purchased by the board, but you still have that the beach background, or the ocean background rather, it's probably that device was not properly enrolled, or perhaps it failed during the enrollment. So say for example, if I'm enrolling this one, I'm going to put it into my organizational group. So my Trillium code for the sake of this webinar is 9999. Yours will be different. It's the same number you see right before you add a printer at your school. If I enter in my school's Trillium number for both the username and the password, it's going to put it into my AirWatch environment. But let's say this iPad, I hammer through this thing and see how it's got a beach background. What should happen eventually is the iPad should now be pulling in all the configurations from AirWatch. So this background should eventually go blue. We already saw the App Store has disappeared. Now the background is blue. So this one's actually going through the process of enrolling. Sometimes what happens though is you start the enrollment and then you're like, you do the setup and then you just go, I'm done with it, and you lock it and you walk away. When you lock the iPad, it is actually no longer connected to the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi goes to sleep. So then say for example you ignore that iPad for a week, and then a week later you come back, you turn it on, and then you still got the beach background. It usually means that the iPad did not finish the enrollment, and in which case I would say you would just wipe and re-enroll that device. I hope that makes some sense, because the enrollment can choke. So if you do the setup and then you kind of like tuck it away really quickly, which is not unusual with the way when we do field services deployments. So we send out a team of field services agents to your school. They round up all your iPads and they wipe them all in succession. They really don't have the time to stick around and verify that each one is in there. So it's possible they may have just enrolled it and then locked it and then put it away, and it never actually completed the enrollment properly, or they didn't let it get the chance to pull in everything. As you can see, that's happening right here. It's pulling in all the apps. The background's already blue and everything like that. So that could be one potential thing. But like I said, if you have an iPad that you do the setup and you actually never get to that point where it asks you for that 4-digit Trillium number, which this one will not, because we have this one simulating as if it were donated. If I go through this setup, and I'm gonna just try to skip through everything here. Set up later, don't use. Terms and conditions, agree, don't share, get started. So now this one, I just finished the setup, but unlike my AirWatch iPad, this one's not going to get that blue background. This one's not going to get the agent app or any apps installed, because it's not bound to AirWatch. And that would be in the case that this iPad was donated to my school, or perhaps our school won it through a grant or anything like that. So I would definitely get the serial number of your iPad and try to wipe it. Will the ocean background ever stay once it is set up in AirWatch? Yes. So as I said, Rosie, there are instances where, as you saw with this one, I wiped it, and there was a brief second when it came up. It still had the ocean background, and then it started pulling in all the configurations. if I went through the setup and then right away was like, nope, done with it, lock it and throw it away, it never got the chance to pull in all its configurations. And then a week later, I pick up my iPad again, I look at it, and it's still got the Ocean background. It just means that it never actually got the opportunity to finish its setup. So um, if if you can verify that that device connects to Wi-Fi and it still has that Ocean background and it's still not doing anything, I would just wipe it. And you can wipe the iPad by going into settings and general, and then at the bottom here, reset, and then erase all contents and settings, and then erase, and then the iPad will wipe like that. And then you can go through the setup again. Unfortunately, that's what's got to happen, because yeah, the enrollment does sometimes choke. So if you have a TDSB iPad, you're 100% positive that it was purchased properly, or not properly, but you know, it wasn't went through a grant, it wasn't donated, it was something that you guys purchased, and it should be in AirWatch, and it doesn't do that. This automatic pulling in of the AirWatch agent and the blue background, and it's got that Ocean background. Just wipe it and do the setup again. The setup really doesn't take that long. The only thing you have to be cognizant of is what your 4-digit Trillium number is. So for me, I use 9999, but that's a fake school. You guys will have a 4-digit number as well, and you just type that in for the username and password, and then this iPad will go into your AirWatch environment. So as I said, those two things. Actually, sorry, I kind of diverted there. I never finished what I was saying. So this iPad is now in AirWatch. You just saw me put it in. The AirWatch agent and the catalog are the two AirWatch default apps that will be on there. There is no App Store. If at any moment you want to bring that App Store back, what you do is you launch the agent app. When you first launch the agent app, it might prompt you for a bunch of things. I would just allow it, because basically it's asking for different permissions. But right here at this moment, it's asking me for a username and password. Any TDSB staff member, the caretaker, your principal, if you have an employee number and password, you can log in here and it will unlock all the restrictions on the iPad. So for me, I'm just going to pull this aside because I don't want to type in my password on the webinar, so just bear with me 1 second. So any TDSB staff member can launch the agent app and then type in their employee number and password here. So I got my employee number and password here filled in, and when I log in, hopefully I typed that password in correctly because it's kind of annoying. There we go. So I see success. So I've logged into the AirWatch agent app, and what's going to happen now, let's see, agent would like to send you notifications. Allow. Okay. All right, cool. So now I'm logged in. There's really not a lot to do in here, but this just tells you that you are logged into the agent app. If I press the home button, now if you look here, that app store is available. So it was gone before, and now it suddenly has reappeared. And we call this checking in and checking out of the agent. So the second I sign into that agent app, it unlocks all the restrictions that are put on the iPad, including hiding the App Store, and there are also some settings here on the left-hand side that are now available, such as the Touch ID and passcode. So now this iPad is completely unlocked. It's no different if you went to the Apple Store and bought your own iPad. There are no restrictions on this iPad. It's completely available for you to modify. Can a student log in with their student number and password? That would be horrible. No, they should not be able to do that. This only works for employee numbers and passwords to unlock all the restrictions. So if a student were to come in here and launch the agent app and use their student number and password, it will not unlock the restrictions like this did. So now I've logged in and I see my app store. This iPad is completely free to modify. I can now tap and hold and remove. Let's see if I can get this thing jiggling here. There you go. So now I can actually remove any app that I want. You can see that they all got the little X next to the top left-hand corner of them. I can do whatever I want to this iPad now that I've checked it. But now I want to give it back to a student. I want to make sure that I do not hand it back to them with it checked in. So what I do is I just sort of reverse the process. To sign out, I just launch the agent app again. It will say that you're still signed in, and then there's actually a, let me see if I can bring that closer. It says log out there, right there. So if you tap log out, you sure you want to log out? Yeah. And then it'll bring you back to the login screen. Allow app and book assignment. Continue, sure. The heck is going on? Sorry. Let me just go back to the agent app. So it's back at the login screen. Now the iPad is logged out, and if I go back to the home screen, the App Store once again is now gone, and the settings have now been changed. I can't add a passcode to the device. So if at any point you have an emergency and you really need to install an app right away, and you can't deploy it with AirWatch, and you really need to do it the old-fashioned way by going into the App Store, signing with an Apple ID, and downloading an app, you can do that. Check into the AirWatch agent. You'll see your App Store again. You can go get that app right away. Same thing with any restrictions. So if at any point the iPad's frustrating you, that is one way to circumvent everything that's already in place with AirWatch. So I think that's pretty important to know. So I'm going to flip back here to my slide. So that was the agent in the catalog. Let's see, and failed to access TDSB media devices with several attempts. So TDSB media devices can be a little bit flaky. I'm pretty sure you can try TDSB-Wi-Fi, which will require your employee number and password. But once you've joined the Wi-Fi, it should then join WLAN TDSB01 after it's enrolled in AirWatch. So we'll have to deal with that in a moment here. So if you delete apps using the unlock method, are the apps gone when they'll lock the device again? Yes. So if I go back here, boom, and let's say, so right now, Google Drive, Classroom, Sheets, Keep, and Docs all automatically push to this iPad, and they push through AirWatch. So if, let's say, I sign into the agent app here, okay. If I sign into the AirWatch agent app again, right? So I log in, and it's basically going to unlock all the restrictions. Success. There we go. And just going to wait for it to get to the screen. Boom. Okay. So I'm signed in. Now I have my App Store. And let's say I remove an app. Let's say, because AirWatch pushed out Google Drive. It forced Google Drive onto this iPad with the way it's set up. But I can actually remove it now. So despite the fact that AirWatch said, to push all these apps out, I can force it. And now that I've removed it, and let's say I then go back, log out, and give it back to, oops, sorry, firing a little quick here. Okay, so, yeah, so the App Store's gone. I signed out of the agent, and Google Drive doesn't come back. Once it's gone, it's gone. Now you can redeploy it with AirWatch, which I can show you later, but if you remove an app from the iPad by signing into the agent and then removing the app, it's gone. With agent, can teachers access apps from the App Store using the Apple ID and password as previously? Yes, Bruce, that's 100% correct. As you saw, the App Store, when it comes back, if you launch the App Store and you go to download an app, it will ask you for an Apple ID. Previously, we gave all the schools the Apple IDs. Those are still in place, and you can still use them. So every school Apple ID will be number, which is the 4-digit Trillium number, -mobile-g at tdsb.on.ca. As far as the password goes, we did set up a default password, which you may have changed, so I can't really speak too much about it. But you can attempt to sign in with the Apple ID, and if you have any difficulties with that, let us know, because then we can assist you in resetting the password for that Apple ID. So how could I do the self-enrollment? So self-enrollment is basically what we just did right here. So we provided every school 2 options of getting set up in AirWatch. There was self-enrollment, and then there was field services assistance. So the idea of self-enrollment was that if your school, let's say, only had 20 iPads, it would probably be easier for you guys just to wipe the iPads themselves and then enroll them into AirWatch. So say, for example, this iPad right here. Self-enrollment basically means you guys just round up all your iPads, wipe them, and put them in AirWatch. So what's that? Back up? Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. I should mention that. If you have content on the... Oh, I'm typing in my password. If you have any content on the iPads, you might want to back them up. So right now, this iPad is already in AirWatch, so I'm kind of trying to pretend it's a non-AirWatch iPad so I can show you. So let's say this iPad is not in AirWatch, and I want to put it in AirWatch. With the idea with self-enrollment, let's say I wanted to put this iPad in AirWatch. All we have to do is go into Settings, then we go into General, scroll down to the bottom, it says Reset, and then erase all contents and settings. Oop, general reset, and then erase all contents and settings there. So this will actually wipe the device. It'll basically say your device is going to be wiped, right? So when I do that, this iPad is now being wiped. When it comes back to life, it's going to come up with that setup menu. And the only important part of that initial setup is making sure that I put in my school's 4-digit trillium number where it shows up. Because once I put it in to that place there, that's how I enroll it. So that's self-enrollment. That's you guys wiping your iPads and putting them in AirWatch simply just by wiping them and then doing the setup and putting in your school's 4-digit trillium number. Once you do that, that iPad has been self-enrolled. Now, if your school has like 100 or like 60 or even I don't know, some schools have like 200 iPads, that can be a real pain. So what we do is we send out field services. They round up all your iPads into one room, and they basically just do this. They wipe them, and then they go through the setup, and then they just punch in your school's trillium number, and then they call it a day. So that's the idea of field assist. So if you guys chose self-enrollment and you guys are actually saying, oh, you know what, this is too difficult, I don't have the time for that, let us know, and then we'll change the ticket to field services, and then they can go on site and help you out with that. But as you can see, as soon as this one wipes, it's not going to be really difficult. So I'll enroll this one again later so I can show you how easy this is. Right now it's wiping, but once it's done the wipe, it's just a matter of going through the setup. Getting back to the presentation. Logging in. So now that we've kind of covered what it looks like on the device side, I'm going to switch focus here to the actual AirWatch web console and what to do from there. So when you go to log into the AirWatch web console, just keep in mind you can log in from anywhere on the web, not just within the TDSB. It is available on the internet. It's a web application. It's a cloud service application. So if you can remember the link, you can log in from home. Not sure why you'd want to do that, but that is one thing that you can do. What's that? Oh, no. Oh yeah, sorry. I should mention that you can't log in everywhere because let's say I wanted to log into the AirWatch console on an iPad, you actually cannot do that. So that's the one place where you cannot log into the AirWatch console is on the iPads themselves because, the AirWatch web console manages the iPad, so it wouldn't make sense to do it from there. There's no browser limitation, so it should work in Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google Chrome, whatever your preference is. And I do have a little section here where it says the username format. I'm going to show that in a little bit more detail. It is important to how you type in your username to log in. And also there is a 4-digit PIN code it asks you to create on first login. And I got the link here. It's kind of a mouthful, cn239.awmdm.com. I don't expect you to remember that, so I'm going to show you the better way of getting to the AirWatch console. I'm just going to minimize this presentation here. And I'm going to go to the desktop. Okay. Oh, everything's gone on my screen now. That was a big mistake. There's the chat. Okay. So here's a standard TDSB desktop. Let's say I want to log into the AirWatch web console. On your desktop, there should be a icon that says your school name. So here is, why did those move? Put that back. Oh, whatever. So for my school, which is fake, is called LAS Test School. But what you'll see is your school name and your school folder, and that's where you can access like your teacher share and the office share and Markbook. All that is in your school office share. So you should have every school should have these 3 icons: 2 printers and then your school office share. So for me, if I go to my school shared folder on the desktop here, we've put a link for AirWatch in the shared folder here. So right there you see AirWatch. So you should be able to go look at your desktop and do that now, and you should see that there's an AirWatch link there. When you double click that link, it'll, okay, well, you can't see it, but it opened off the screen here on my other browser, so I'm just gonna copy that over into here because I'm using Internet Explorer. So you would click that link, and what would happen is it would take you to here. Boom. So that's the AirWatch web console login. And that's how you get to it, is you just essentially click that link in your folder. Once you've brought up the web console, I did say that it is important how you type in your username. So I'm going to zoom in here so I can show you in greater detail. Maybe that's excessive, but whatever. So for the username, I don't just type in my employee number and password. I'm actually going to type in TDSB / and then my employee number. that's not my employer. Now, the TDSB part is, the TDSB backslash is important. It does not have to be uppercase. It can be lowercase. It can be whatever case you want. It's not case sensitive. As long as you have TDSB and then backslash and then your employee number, you should be able to log in. And another important note is the backslash. The backslash is the one directly above the enter key, not the one to the left of the shift key. So here's a forward slash, and that's a backslash. So we're going to use the backslash. So TDSB, backslash, and then your employee number. And then obviously you just type in your current network password. Bear with me one moment as I do this. Okay. Put in your current network password and click login. Of course, I'm still zoomed in a lot, so let me just back out here. Boom. Okay. So for me, it went right away to this dashboard. For you, if you're logging in right now and playing along, and this is the first time you've logged in, what you might see is that it's going to ask you for the terms of agreement. You can just click accept to that. Don't worry about reading that. And then it will ask, so that there's a screenshot of the terms of agreement. So just scroll down and click accept. And then what it may ask you is create a 4-digit PIN code. This 4-digit PIN code can be reset at any time. It's not overly difficult. The 4-digit PIN code is essentially just so that if you want to wipe an iPad in AirWatch, this 4-digit PIN code will make sure that you did that intentionally. So let's say I go to wipe an iPad in AirWatch. Right before I wipe it, it'll ask me to type in that 4-digit PIN code just to make sure I didn't click it on accident. So create it whatever you want. It can be really simple as long as you can remember it. And if you don't remember it, you can easily reset it. So you may see that create a 4-digit PIN code. And then, of course, you'll be greeted with the dashboard, which I have here. So if you guys are having difficulties logging in, feel free to mention that in the chat. But we did try to make sure that everyone here does have access. So once you are logged in and you got past the terms of agreement and you created your 4-digit PIN code, you're going to see this dashboard. This dashboard, really not a lot to see here other than like a higher level overview of the devices that you have in your environment. So it's got a bunch of graphs that kind of show, how many have no passcode, not encrypted, blah, blah, blah. The important graphs I'd say are right here, this last seen breakdown. This would basically show you when the device was last seen, meaning the last time that that device came in, said hi to AirWatch, and said, I'm alive and I'm connected to the network. If you have an iPad that, let's say, hasn't been, or that's been last seen in 16 to 30 days, for example, it means that iPad has not been connected to the network and talking with AirWatch anywhere between 16 to 30 days. So I can actually interact with any of these graphs here. If I click this bar, it'll actually take me to what I'm going to show you next, which is the list view of your devices. Or at least it's supposed to. It's not doing it right now. Oh, that one. Okay. So this shows me the devices that were last seen in less than a day when I clicked here. So that's basically the dashboard. I wouldn't spend too much time there. It's just basically, oops, what am I doing? Dashboard. All right, so here we go. And it shows you how many devices you have in your environment. The more important place is we're going to go to list view. So we toggle over on the left-hand side. There's basically devices, apps and books, and groups and settings. These are the 3 controls here. I still have the Ocean background I wiped when asked for the Apple ID. I use the 4-digit trillion number for and the ID and password. So if you still have the Ocean background after you wiped, did it, Rosie, I'm not sure if you saw, but did at any point did it ask you for the did it come up saying anything about remote management? Because if it didn't ask you for that remote management, then it's basically considered like a non-TDSB iPad, despite the fact that it might not be. So I think here I wiped an iPad. Let me just walk you through it. So let's say you wipe an iPad like this, right? Sorry, let me just back out here so you can see right from the beginning. Oops, start over. Oh, that's the first screen. Okay, so I chose my language English, chose my country Canada. It says here, quick start, set up manually. So I'm going through the setup now just to show you, Rosie, what you should have saw on your screen. And if you didn't see it, then that iPad would be considered donated or purchased through a third party, or maybe perhaps we need that serial number to see if it's in what's known as DEP, which is what forces the iPad to join AirWatch. So I get to the part where I choose a network, right? And this next part right here is where the magic happens. It will say remote management. Come on. It may take a few minutes. Here we go, retrieving your configuration. And boom. If you do the setup and you did not see this part here, that iPad is not in what's known as DEP, which means it is not going to automatically attempt to join AirWatch when you wipe it, which for us means that the iPad was either donated, purchased through a third party, or won through a grant, anything like that. If you're 100% confident that that is not the case, that iPad was purchased and you got it with a bundle with a bunch, please get us the serial number, let us know, and we can check it out and see if we can add that into DEP so that you can actually enroll it properly. Because I get to this screen here, this iPad, yeah, so if it did not say, yeah, if I don't get the remote management, then that iPad is a non-considered donated or went through a grant or anything like that. So this one, once I hit next, it should ask me for my username and password. If I didn't see this during the setup, that iPad is not forced to automatically go into AirWatch, and it should be if it was purchased through the usual channels. And I think I showed you with, I had a non-TDSB iPad here. This one has the ocean background, right? I go to English, right? And I go to Canada, and then join the Wi-Fi. Yeah, get us the serial number for those ones, because then we can log a ticket to our app admin team, and they can take a look to make sure what the status is of that iPad. This one is is supposed to simulate probably what you guys are seeing. It gets to this point here, but you can see now it's not asking me for remote management. And if I keep going through this screen and I just kind of follow along, create a passcode, no, don't add a passcode, continue. Eventually, once I get through this entire setup, at no point did it ask me for this remote management. Then it's because this iPad is considered that it was, purchased through a third party. Yeah, see, now it's asking for the Apple ID. Don't fill in Apple ID. If you're seeing the Apple ID during the setup, you can actually skip it. So you'll see in very small lettering, it'll say, don't have an Apple ID or forgot it. I can tap that, and then it says forgot, create, no. Set up later in settings. So I can kind of get past this part here by saying don't use. And terms and conditions, agree. Siri, don't use Siri, don't share. Get started. So now I'm done the setup. But again, it didn't ask me for that 4-digit number, and it didn't say anything about remote management. Oh, this one's kind of backed out, but it didn't ask me for the remote management, and as a result, it's not going to automatically go into AirWatch. We do have instructions on how to enroll the device that is donated through a third party, and I'll show that at the end, just because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to make that abundantly clear. If anyone's seeing this and are having a problem with that, I hope that makes sense to you, and if not, please let me know, and I'll continue to hammer that point home. But going back to the console here, so we've logged into the AirWatch console. I'm hoping you guys have logged into the AirWatch console and you created your 4-digit PIN code and accepted the terms of agreement. This is the dashboard. Again, we're not going to spend too much time here. We're going to toggle over to list view. And list view is going to show us a list of all of our iPads that are currently in our environment. I currently have 2, and this one, I don't know what this one is, but this one must have been enrolled and then gone. But from here, what you can see is the iPad name, the version of the iOS that it's running. It even shows you the hardware. So this is a iPad 5th generation 32 gigabyte space gray. So it shows you like the hardware model. It's just kind of like, this is where you'll see a list of all your devices. I only have 3 here, but you may see more. And again, how did these devices get into this list, and why is there only 3? These devices get here through that enrollment process. So that iPad that I just enrolled here into the 999 group, this one here, this one right here. This one got in here because I did that setup. So here's one that hasn't done the setup. If I continue through the setup and I hit next, and then I come here and ask me for this username and password, when I enter 999, it puts it in here. So these iPads are here because when I got to here, I entered in my school trillium number, 9999, 9999, right? And then I hit next. So now it's doing the enrollment part, and then that will put it into here. It actually already shows here because it was in here before, so I'm pretty sure that the one that I just did, this one, is already one of these two iPads here. And continue through the setup, blah blah blah. Boom. So that one was just enrolled, and it's basically it's one of these two. I'm not sure, but I'll explain that in just a second. So once the iPads are enrolled in an AirWatch, like that, you'll see that they appear here. And when they appear here, you can then look up all the device information. One important thing to see on this screen here is the last seen value. So let me just zoom in. So this column here, last seen, tells you when the device was last checked in an AirWatch. So I have two iPads here with a last seen value of one that says 14M, which means 14 minutes, and one that says 30M, which means 30 minutes. And then I got one here that says 28D, which means 28 days. So that last seen value will tell you, can kind of indicate to you whether your iPads are having a problem. So for example, this one hasn't been online and talking with AirWatch in 28 days. I may want to investigate this iPad and see what the deal is with it. Personally, I don't think this is one of our iPads. It's kind of an older model here, and I don't believe we have it in stock. So I'm not sure where this came from. But nonetheless, that's the idea, is that that last seen value will show you when the iPad last came online. Let me zoom back out here. And I can then go into every iPad, from details view to list view. So, list view to details view. So right now I'm in list view. You can see I'm under devices, list view, and it's showing me a list of my iPads. I can shift my focus from the list to an individual iPad. So I'm going to click this one here, and it's going to show me all the details of just this iPad. So I'm no longer looking at a list. I'm looking at just this iPad in itself. And from here, there's a bunch of things you can see and do. So when I'm looking at the list view, it just shows me the details. Like there's the serial number. There is, what version it's running, the battery level, etc., etc. It's really not just a kind of display here. Under more actions in the top right-hand corner, there's some other things you can do, such as I can reboot the device. I can wipe the device. In fact, I believe when I said that when you first log in, it asks you to create a 4-digit PIN code. So say, for example, I want this device to start fresh, vanilla. Something's wrong with it and I want to wipe it. When I go to more actions and then device wipe, it's going to ask me for that 4-digit PIN code. If I scroll down here, and basically I would enter in my 4-digit PIN code. Of course, I forgot mine, and it would wipe the device. There it is. So it asked me to confirm that I want to wipe that device with that 4-digit PIN code, and that's just to make sure that I'm doing what it is that I wanted intentionally. So if I switch back to this device, I basically told it to wipe itself, and sure enough, there it goes. It's wiping. So you can wipe the device from the AirWatch console, as I've done with this one. So that's a list. That's the details view. There's some other features in here for more actions. You can clear the passcode on the device. Right now, obviously, there is no passcode on the iPads, and students cannot put them on there, and you can put them on there. But if you do put a passcode on your device, you can clear it from AirWatch. And what else? There's a whole bunch of features here. I don't want to spend too much time on here, but I would play around with the more actions features. Let's see. Can you go back one level from details view to list view? When I try, it sends me back to first level. So details view, and if I go to list view, right? So if I'm looking at my list view and I click an iPad, it then shifts me over to details view. Now this one says unenrolled because I just yeah. Oh, not here. Down. Details. Yeah. To the right. Oh, I see. You click this navigation here. List view. Ah. Well, that's silly. Yeah. Okay. Bruce, if that's what you're referring to, that's news to me. So yeah, if I click an iPad and it takes me to details view, and then I click this list view up here, it sends me all the way back to the dashboard. That makes no sense. All right. Yeah. So just use the side menu, and this side menu here is collapsible. So there's a little arrow down here. You can hide it and expand it. So it's just an extra navigation pane there. So yeah. But now I kind of want to shift gears here. In the list view, I want to show you that you can rename an iPad from this screen here, and you can see that all my iPads are named iPad, iPad, and then whatever this gobbledygook is. Your iPads may have some default names that that we encourage you to rename, and the reason you want to rename them is because when you go to actually uh, deploy apps to them or create groups so that you can deploy apps to them, if they all have the name iPad, you're not going to be able to uniquely identify which belongs to which. So what we recommend is when you're using AirWatch is that you kind of divide your iPads based on their use. So if you have an iPad if you have like, let's say 10 iPads that are used strictly for grade 1s or 10 iPads that are used strictly for grade 2s, then I would rename my iPad to something that makes sense to me or makes sense with my naming convention at my school. So as an example, I'm going to pretend that this is my school. It's called Maple Grove Community School, and let's say we are JK to grade 6, and I have an iPad here with me. Where's my mouse? Oh, right here. Okay, so let me switch over to my iPad. So this iPad is this one here. Oh, you can't see my mouse. This iPad right here, that I got my mouse on, is this iPad that I have in my hand. It's this one. If I want to rename this iPad such that it makes sense for my school, if I flip this thing over to the back, I don't really have a label on it, but we recommend that at your school that you label your iPads. So let's say this was iPad number 4 or whatever, and it's for grade 1, then I would call this, grade 1 iPad number 4. So on this iPad, if you already have them labeled in a way that makes sense for you guys, you can change the name of your iPad such that it will appear in AirWatch as the name that appears on this device by going into Settings. You go into General, and then at the top, About, and then there's a name field right here. iPad, right? So that's not helpful for me. So again, we're going to pretend this is iPad number for grade 1, 4, whatever. Let's do that. So I'm going to change the name here under Settings, General, and About to, I'll show you in just a second, Jennifer. So I'm going to call this one grade 4 iPad 3. Why not? Okay. So we can imagine that this iPad is designated for the grade 4 class, and it is iPad number 3 in that on the back of the iPad, it's got a sticker that says 3. It doesn't have a sticker that says 3, but that's fine. But you can see that I've changed the name here under Settings, General, and then About to grade 4 iPad 3. What should happen is the name here in AirWatch should then reflect that it has now been changed. Sometimes when you do that, it takes a supremely long time for that name to reflect. So it still says iPad here. Every time I do a webinar, it never works, and I don't know why. But I'm going to see if I can get it to work. I'm going to query this device. So if I use this query feature up here, it forces the device to report back all its information to AirWatch. So I'm going to do device information. I'm going to refresh, and I want to see if it changed its name, because it's supposed to. It still hasn't changed its name. Still says iPad. Okay. One last thing is I can try. Sometimes it's just a matter of waiting, but I can try signing into the agent and see if it'll update its name that way. As you can see, I share your frustrations. So I log into the AirWatch agent. Okay. Hopefully this forces the name. I shouldn't have to do that though. I'm just testing here, because that name is supposed to change whenever you change it on the device side. I'm actually more or less running through this so I can show the person who told me that this works, that it sometimes is a pain. So yeah, it still says up here, this is what I'm looking at right here, because I named it the device something else on the device itself, which is probably the easier way of doing it. because when I go and rename it on the device, I both know, you know, that this is indeed the device that I have in my hand, and it's got the label on the back so I can reference that. So if you change it on the device, it's supposed to change it on AirWatch, and no matter how many times I try to get it to work, it does not work, and I will bring this to that guy's attention later. But Jennifer asked a good question, is how do I know that this iPad here, let's say, because right now it still says iPad, so there's still nothing that indicates to me that that iPad is indeed the one that I have in my hand here. How do I know that this one is that one? One really painful way of doing it, and the only way I could think of doing it, is when I'm looking at a list of my iPads. If I want to see which one this one is, I can go to Settings, General, and then About, and then I can take down that serial number there. So I don't know if you can see it. This is a nightmare, but this is the only way, really, that I can uniquely identify that the other way around. So if I switch back up over here, and now in the right-hand corner where it says Search List, I can search for that serial number. So I can do GCHVJE Q4 HLF9. So that's the full serial number. If I hit enter, it's going to filter down my list. So now I know that that iPad is indeed this one here. So you can rename it from the console side by clicking the pencil here. No, you don't change the name of the iPad in the agent itself. So when you go into the agent, right here, yeah, you can't change the name. Let me try send data. Device enrolled. Advanced. Yeah, you don't change the name here. You change the name on the device by going into Settings, and then General, and then About. Oh, sorry. About at the top, and then the name field shows there, and then from there you should be able to change the name. And that iPad, and then that name is supposed to reflect in AirWatch. Yeah, and one thing that I'll say that's kind of unfortunate is that students can change the name, and there's nothing that is able to prevent them from changing the name on the device. So as I said, Jennifer, I now know that this iPad is this one by searching the serial number in the top right-hand corner. And it shows me that this is the only iPad there. So I can actually rename it from the console. If I click the pencil icon, I can change it from here. So I named it on the iPad, Grade 4 iPad. I'm actually going to call it iPad, Grade 4 iPad. I'm going to call it 45, just to show you what happens. So I can rename the device from the AirWatch console, and if I check this checkbox here, this is set friendly name as device name, and then hit save, what's going to happen is it's going to take this name that I've given it and force it over to the device. So now, if I go back to the device, and I back out here, you can see here that the name is actually changed to what I'd set it on the console. So grade 4 equals iPad 45. Horrible name, but so you can see that that name is now that name, right? And it pushed it from AirWatch, so it got the name from here and forced it to the device. Now it's supposed to work the other way around, which is the easier way for you guys to rename your iPads, is to actually do it on the device. You come in here and you change the name on the device, and it's supposed to take effect in the AirWatch console. I'm not sure why every time I do a webinar it never works. I'm going to change it to grade 4 iPad 3, and I'm hoping by the end of this webinar that name will have changed in AirWatch. So I'm calling it that, and let's see if by the end of this it gets the name. Cool. Carter asked, is there any way you can send a signal such as flashing to an iPad from the console? There are some cool features in More Actions. So now that I know that this iPad is the one that I have in my hand, if let's say I want to, if I go into the iPad here and I go into More Actions, what I can do is I can actually let's see, there's Find My Device, which is neat. If I need to locate my device but I don't know where it is, I can say message to display. We're going to say Find Device. Number of times the sound is to be played, I'm going to choose, let's say 10, and the gap between each sound will be 3 seconds. So if I hit save, what's going to happen is, what's this? Gap between sound must be 10. Oh, okay. So the gap between each sound needs to be 10 seconds. If I hit save, what's going to happen is it's going to send to that device a sound, or rather it's going to set off like an alarm that forces it to start beeping. It hasn't got it yet. Let me just go to the internet and wake it up. Anything here? Come on. So most things with AirWatch are all based on the network. That is the idea, though. It's supposed to start beeping. Maybe it'll get it as we go along. You did not click the specific iPad which you're working on. Yeah. Okay. I'm not gonna wait for it to start beeping, but it's supposed to. That's the idea of the find mode. So maybe there's something going on with the network here. I'm gonna refresh this page. Keep forgetting where my mouse is. So one indication of whether something will get it is this last seen value. So it shows that the device was talking 31 seconds ago. So it definitely should have gotten that ping sound. Maybe it's the volume. I don't know. But there are a bunch of things you can do here in more actions. I'm not sure why it's not beeping or changing the name. There's lost mode is another one. If I go to lost mode, what I can do is I can lock that iPad down saying, hey, this iPad is lost. Please return to Mr. Silva. And I can provide a phone number, 647. I'm not going to put my real number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I can do that. So I have a little note here, and if I send it to the iPad, see, that worked right away. That's silly. Okay, so let me show you my iPad. So now this iPad is lost. So if somebody picks up this iPad and I couldn't find it, they can't use it. If I hit the home button, nothing happens. Completely locked down. Can't do anything. And the idea is that I would take this iPad, look at the contact number, bring it back to the person, and then when the person gets that iPad back, so somebody said, here you go, here's the iPad back that you lost, I can come back in here. I can go back in here to more actions, and then it still says enable lost mode, so let me refresh the page. If I refresh the page, now that I have my iPad back, I can do disable lost mode, which will undo that setting here. So if I'll show them. So now if I go back to my iPad, I've disabled lost mode, and now says iPad located, the location, yada yada yada. And if I press the home button, oh wait, continue. There we go. And now I can use the iPad again. So that's another cool little thing that can happen with the iPad as far as renaming, as far as those actions go. There's also a location tab here that'll show you if you have location services turned on. We're here at One Civic Center. So if I toggle back to this location tab will show you where the iPad is physically located based on the map data that it gets over the Wi-Fi. So if I go back to my iPad under settings, in order for this to work, I have to have location services turned on, which is under settings and then privacy, and then location services needs to be turned on. If you have location services turned on, then AirWatch will be able to physically track the iPad. You can turn it off if that's a concern of yours, etc., etc. What's that? Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to get into semantics, but yeah, that's one other thing you can do as far as tracking an iPad goes. Is there's a location tab. So let's get away from all that. So those are all the different features you can do from within the iPad. I'm hoping that iPad will rename itself at some point during this webinar, because I think that is an important thing to have happen as far as renaming your iPads go, because you do want to have your iPads uniquely named in a way that means something to you. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to actually deploy an app to this iPad. Actually, we're going to do it to multiple iPads. I'm going to do it to both of my iPads. Yeah, here, you set that up. Thanks. So if I want to deploy an app en masse to a bunch of iPads, I'm going to go to the Groups and Settings tab down here. And then I'm going to go to Groups. And then I'm going to go to Assignment Groups. And from here, I'm going to create a smart group. And a smart group will basically contain all my iPads. I have a bunch already fictitiously created here, grades 1 to 6. Let's say I'm getting more iPads for the library. I can add a smart group by clicking this button here. The first thing you see when you click Add Smart Group is this screen right here. We want to toggle away from this screen. By default, you can see up here it says Choose Type, Select Criteria. Every time you go to create a smart group, switch over to Select Devices or Users. Select Criteria will automatically try to get every single iPad in this group. If we do Select Devices or Users, we can manually put the devices in there. So this one says by switching, you're going to lose everything. That's fine. We don't have anything there. So now I'm in Select Devices or Users, and now I can actually add my devices in there, right? So let's call this the group name. I can add it up here in the top right-hand corner. Let's call this JK iPads, right? And now I want to go look through my iPad list and pull in all my JK iPads. Now, if I come in here, you can see I've this is the list of all my iPads that I have. There's only 2, but for you, you guys will see more. If I had not renamed my iPads, all I would see is iPad, 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 you know, and I wouldn't be able to make heads or tails whether that iPad is a JK iPad or a grade 4 iPad. There's nothing that uniquely tells me what that iPad is. So that's why it's important to rename it, so that when you get here to group them, you can add your iPad in a way that makes sense. So this one is the grade 4 iPad. I'm not going to add it to a JK iPad. Let's pretend that this one, which has a long name that I have not renamed, is a JK iPad, and I'll just put it in there. Why not? So I select the iPad from the list, and then I click Add, and then it moves it over to the right-hand side. Once it's on the right-hand side, it's in that group. I can hit Save, and now I have a new group here called JK iPads. So, and I can go back in later and edit it. So if I get more JK iPads, I can click the group name, and let's say I got another one. Oh, this one's now a JK iPad, and then I can add it in and keep adding them into this group. So you can group them logically, right? I'm going to go to grade 4 iPads, and I'm going to add in my grade 4 iPad. That would make sense. So I'm going to go to Select Devices or Users. Again, by default, it goes to Select Criteria. Go to Select Devices or Users. You're going to lose everything. That's totally fine because we haven't done anything yet. Click OK. In this drop-down field here, we put in our cursor, choose our iPad, grade 4 iPad 45, add. So I got a grade 4 iPad in the grade 4 iPads group up here. And now I hit Save. So I haven't added any apps to these yet, but I have grouped them, which means now I can go start adding apps to them in a way that makes sense. One thing I want to show you though is that there is a group by default in all your environments called the iPads All group. As the name implies, this group contains all your iPads. So if you don't want to mess around with creating all these different groups and you just say, you know what, I just want all my iPads to have all the apps that I want them to have. I'm not going to split them up into different uses. You know, then you can just use this group here, the iPads All group. So if you click it, you'll see that it'll already contain all your iPads here. And sometimes you want certain apps to be applied to all your iPads because they're pretty standard, right? Like your Google Suite. So a lot of people will take their Google Suite and apply it to the iPads All group because, you know, every iPad's going to want the Google Suite. It's not like it's a specialty app. It's not like it's something only the grade 3s will use or only the grade 4s will use. So you can take the ones that you know are going to be used by everyone and apply it to the iPads All group. So that iPads All group should exist in your environment already, and you can apply apps to it, which I'm going to show in just a second. You can create your own specialized groups, like you can see here that I've created all these ones, so that if I wanted an app that only goes to grade 6s, I can then apply it to this group. And one more thing is that if you had apps that were purchased prior to AirWatch, you might see a group in your smart groups that has an app name, and it'll say something like 20 licenses. So I have one here just to simulate it. It's called Monkey Math 20 licenses. If I bought Monkey Math prior to AirWatch being enrolled or deployed throughout the entire TDSB, they may have created a group here to be backwards compatible with your old previously purchased app. And how that would work is, let's say I wanted an app to have Monkey Math and use one of those 20 licenses. I can just put iPads into this group like that, and they'll get Monkey Math just by hitting save. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up. If you see anything that says you know you didn't create it, but it says an app name and then like a license count. That is because that's something that you purchased prior to uh, AirWatch being deployed board wide. And just if you wanted them to have that app, you just add them to that group. Yes. Show them how to move which columns. Oh yeah. So there's some columns up here at the top, just for the sake of navigating this screen that are pretty important. You can see that once the cursor changes from like a hand to that thing, you can kind of drag them. And these columns are pretty helpful because it'll actually help you better understand how these groups are laid out. For example, this JK iPads group, there's assignments and devices are the two important columns. So if I'm looking at the assignments tab, what I can do is I can click that number. So there, if it's 0, you won't be able to click it. But if you have a number there, you can click it and it'll show you all the current assignments that you've created for that group. So in this case, if I go to applications, I can see that I've applied all these applications to the iPads all group. And these profiles are web clips, which hopefully I can show. But this will show me all the apps that are currently applied to that group. So if you see a number there, you can kind of look at, okay, so my iPads all group has these applications applied to it. So if I get a new iPad in, it's going to get these by default. There's the devices here as well. This device column will show you how many devices are currently inside that group. In this case, this one has 2. If I click the number 2, it'll show me both the iPads that are in that group, and there's only 2. So that's another important thing to do. So you can delve in and see what currently exists in that group. So let's say I got all my iPads grouped. Now I want to deploy an app to them. I'm going to go to Apps and Books on the left-hand side here. By default, I see this screen that takes me to this Purchase tab. In the top right-hand corner, what I want to do is once I get here, you'll see that there's a bunch of apps that just basically say unknown, unknown, unknown. That's not very helpful to me. That's not. These are not my apps. These are kind of a board-wide look at all the apps that exist. So we need to filter down our list using our 4-digit trillion number. So for the sake of this example, my school's 4-digit trillion number, as you saw when I was enrolling, was 9999. So if I put in my school's 4-digit trillion number in the top right-hand corner here, it'll take this giant list of apps that don't necessarily apply to me and filter it down to just the ones that I have. So these are all my apps that I can actually work with in AirWatch. See that? Now, how did these apps get here? These apps got here through the submission of the app request form. So it's not like you have access to deploy every app that you want to every iPad right away out the box. Unfortunately, that's not the way it's set up for us. All the apps have to be submitted through the app request form, and they need to be vetted by our app admin department or our teaching and learning department. So these apps all got here in this list because I submitted the app request form, which you can get to the app request form. It should be in the link, the video description below. But if you cannot remember that, if you go to serviceit.tdsb.on.ca/MDM, so serviceit.tdsb.on.ca/MDM, that'll take you to our Everything AirWatch page. For now, it's going to be migrated soon because it's not very intuitive, but I won't go into detail about that. But nonetheless, on this page, you can see it says, click here for the app request form for free and paid apps. So if I click this, it's going to give me some instructions on how to get those apps. So by default, these apps that I see here will not be here in your environment. You should have some apps there because during the process, as we ask you to submit the app request form, but basically, let's say I now have a need for a new app. I need to come back into this link here. Say submit your app request by using the app request form by clicking here. Cool beans. And it takes me to the app request form. So let's say I'm looking at my list of apps here and I want a new one. Let's see, what do I want? I want Google Translate's already on here. What's another one? Oh, shows how much we know. Angry Birds, why not? So let's say I want some games on here. What I need to do first, I need to go to this link here. So this page actually details how the entire process works. Basically, what they ask you to do is find the app on this link here. So if I'm looking for an app, let's say I want Angry Birds, I would search on this page here. Angry Birds. And the reason they make you search here and copy the link is so that if you submit an app request form, they want to make sure that you get the correct app. Sorry, go ahead. The iPad's app toggle, the drop-down menu. Okay. So one other thing, sorry, I should have mentioned, is when you're searching for an app on here, it says media type all by default. You want to change that to iOS apps, because if you change it to all, this search is going to actually show you also some Mac apps. So you see here it says iPad apps, and then below here it says iPhone apps. That's fine, but then here's the problem: is Mac apps. If you submit the app request form and submit a link to a Mac app, they'll add the Mac app into AirWatch. I'm hoping they catch it going forward, but it has happened in the past. So we don't want to see Mac apps because we can't put Mac apps onto our iPads. So just on here, before you search, change the media type to iOS because that is for iPads. We can hit search, and now it'll show me all the iOS apps that match the term Angry Birds. Now I chose Angry Birds specifically to show you why it is that we ask that you do this. So say for example, I want Angry Birds HD. Well, you can see that if I search Angry Birds, there's like 100 different versions of Angry Birds. They've been around for a while. They make different versions of their game. So if I'm on this app request form, okay, it's going to ask me all my information. So first name, Brandon, last name, Silva, and employee number, my role. I am none of these, other. Email, I can put in my email address here. My site is a school, even though it's really not. It's going to say select your school name. I'm hoping Maple Grove is in here. Darn, no. Okay, so you would see your school name in this list here, but my fake school, Maple Grove, doesn't exist in this list. So let me pick. Oh wait, what should I do here? I'll leave that blank. Hopefully they don't take this thing seriously. You know, I just won't save it, so that's fine. I need to choose a school, so but nonetheless, I get here. It says app type. I'm going to choose. There's two options. There's free and paid. If I choose paid, it's going to ask me for my principal, the cost center, and the general ledger. And that is so that obviously with a paid app, they're going to bill it to the school. You can choose both, so you can submit a form that does both paid and free apps. Or if you just want a free app, you toggle free. It'll say, are you using AirWatch? We're going to say yes. And then down here is where I actually put in my apps. So it says app name. Now, if I just type in Angry Birds and submit this form, they're going to get this and they're going to say Angry Birds. Okay, well, which one do they want? There's so many versions of Angry Birds. So what we request is during the app request process, you find your app on this page, right? I find the app that I want, and then in the top address bar here, I'm gonna right click and go to copy. I'm gonna copy that URL at the top, so that when they come in here, even though I only typed Angry Birds and this is technically Angry Birds HD, they'll now know exactly which one it is that I wanted because I put in the URL directly to the one that I want. And all this information is detailed on this page here. It explains how to go about doing this. So once I've submitted that form, I'm not going to submit it, but what will happen is it'll create a ticket that will go to our app admin team, and then they will basically add the free app in. And once that ticket says it's resolved, you'll see that your new app will appear here. I hope that's clear. And if I get an email saying that the ticket is resolved and I still don't see my app here after searching my school's 4-digit showing number in the top right-hand corner, I can hit sync assets, which will force it to look for any new apps that exist. So that's how all these apps actually got here. So once I actually have an app here that I'm actually allowed to work with, now I actually need to deploy it. So I'm going to deploy explain everything. And what I do is I click the app name, and actually, sorry, I should show you this before before I dive right in there. I'm going to choose one that I know. So I'm going to choose an app that I actually cannot deploy because just for the sake of showing you an example here. I think it's Starfall. Okay, so let's say I wanted to deploy Starfall. I click the app. No, that's not it. Sorry. Seesaw? I think it's Seesaw. There it is. Okay, so when you first go to deploy an app, if you click the app name, so let's say I wanted to deploy Seesaw. I click the name of the app here, and then you'll see this screen. There's a big blue button here that says Enable Device Assignment. If you see this button, you must press this button. You cannot deploy an app without pressing this button. I don't know why, to be honest, but if you don't press the button, the app will not deploy to the device. So if you ever see this big blue button, you press it, it'll say, are you sure? You hit OK, and you'll never have to press it again going forward. I just wanted to make that pretty clear before we continue, is that if you ever see the big blue button, click it, click OK, and then it will never come up again. And then when you press that button, the next time that you click the app, what you'll see, oh, that's a bad example. Let's do Scratch Junior. When I click the app name, you'll see that that big blue button is now gone. And now I can deploy this app. So let's say I want to deploy Scratch Junior to my iPads. I click the app name. I make sure that blue button's pressed, and it looks like it is, so that's fine. I'm going to go to Save and Assign. I'm now going to go to Add Assignment in the top left-hand corner here. And from here, this is where all the magic happens. So this is where I choose my smart group that I'm going to deploy this app to. So if I hover my mouse over Add Assignment By, and I do License Code by Smart Group, I can now choose a smart group from this list. So I can select the smart groups here, and as you can see, these are all the groups that I created earlier. So I have an iPad here that went into the grade 4 group. I can choose my grade 4 iPad group. So I want Scratch Junior just to go to my grade 4 iPads. The second I choose that group, it's going to show me how many devices are in that group. I now need to allocate at least one license. So even though this app is free, we can see that we have 500 licenses here to play with. So even free apps, we still have to be accountable for how many licenses we use. So when you request a free app, you get 500 licenses for to work with. So I have 500 licenses, and I have one device in my grade 4 iPads group. I need to give this group at least one license. But what I recommend is you give it more than what you need. So that, for example, right now, my grade 4 iPad group only has one device in there, but let's say, in a week later, I get more iPads and they all are going to the grade 4 classroom. I won't have to come back in here and modify the license count. So I'm going to say that I'm going to future accommodate that I'm going to have 50 grade 4 iPads. Kind of overshooting a lot, but the idea is that let's say I get 49 more iPads, I can just put them in the grade 4 group, and then they'll start getting this app right away. So I've chosen my group, and I've given it 50 licenses for one device. You can add multiple groups here, so I can say, yeah, I want the grade 4s to have it, but I also want the grade 5s to have it as well. And here, one more. Boom. So now I got the grade 5. There are no devices in the grade 5 group, but that's fine. There are only going to be 25 devices in there. So as you can see, every time I put in an allocated value here, my license count in the top left-hand corner here is now changing. So I had 500 licenses, and now I have 425 that are unallocated, with 75 being used. So I have 500 licenses to play with, even though it's a free app. And you can just keep going on like this. You can just choose as many groups as you want. If I want all my iPads to have it, then I can choose the iPads all group, right? And then I could just say, 100 licenses for the iPads all group. So now my grade 4 iPads, my grade 5 iPads, and my iPads all group are all going to get Scratch Junior. There is also the assignment type. Auto means that the second I click save, it's going to automatically push that app to those iPads. There is another option here for on demand, which I'm going to show just in a second. But for now, we're going to just choose auto, which means the second I hit save, it's going to deploy these apps to these groups. So it's going to deploy Scratch Junior to the grade 4 iPads, the grade 5 iPads, and the iPads all group. Now you may be wondering if I'm using the iPads all group, which already contains all my iPads, what and I have a grade 4 iPad group here that's using one device. That's kind of redundant, right? It is, but the idea is that even though it's redundant, it will not cause any problems. So this one device that's in the grade 4 group is also in the iPads all group. It's going to deploy it anyways. So that's just one thing I wanted to make clear. Do not worry about any redundancy. So if this same iPad was in 2 groups, it's just going to deploy it anyways. It's not going to cause any conflicts. So the second I hit save, when I hit save, what's going to happen is it should automatically deploy that to all of these iPads here. It's going to give me one more screen here showing me that, these are the assignments you created. I'm going to do save and publish. It's going to show me which iPads are going to get it, like in a list view, which is cool. And then I hit publish. And now what should happen is my iPad should be getting that app. And I'm going to toggle back over here. Sometimes it all depends on the network. So I'm looking at it here. I still don't see the app. Sometimes it does take time. One thing you can do, the App Store is still there. I haven't signed out of the agent. I'm just sign out of the agent here. Oh, somebody is breaking in here. So let me log out here. Sorry, somebody just came into the room here. There we go. So it's signed out. So my iPad still has not gotten the app that I've assigned to it. Sometimes what helps getting those apps deployed is just a matter of waking the iPad up. Oh, look at that. Actually, just as I was saying that, Scratch Junior started deploying. Yeah. 5 minutes? Okay. Same thing applies with this iPad. So they're both in here, and we've already gone way over time. And that that app should eventually deploy here. And if it doesn't deploy right away, you can just go to Safari to check that and make sure that it's on the internet. I got to Google, so this one's definitely online. Let me just turn the brightness up. So it's connected to the network. So eventually what should happen is once this iPad gets the command for the iPad for the device, it should deploy on this one, but it has not done so yet. So that one could take some time, but as you saw with this one, it came pretty quickly. So just be cognizant that it is all based on the network and it may not deploy right away. Now the same is true for removing the app. So let's say I now no longer have a need for Scratch Junior on my iPads. I can scroll down here and I can just reverse what I've done. So if I click Scratch Junior again, I can go to save and assign, and I can see that these are the rules that I created before, and now I no longer have a need for it. What I can do is I can select this rule and delete it, and that's going to remove every assignment I made for Scratch Junior. And I'm going to do save and publish, and now it's going to remove it from my iPad. So you can imagine with, one, it's not very impressive. It's already gone. There you go. It's not very impressive, but if you have like 100 iPads, it makes managing them a lot easier. The one last thing I wanted to show was the